Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
In episode 53, we have joining us Jennifer Wheeler. She's a senior program manager at NACFE, where we talk about her career at Walmart, how to adjust operations to accommodate new technologies. We discuss what excites her about the work with NACFE, her passion to be of service to the trucking industry, and NACFE's report on electric vans and step vans. She also encourages fleets to talk to each other about what they are doing in the area of electrification and how important it is for them to be part of the solution. Today we have joining me Jennifer Wheeler. Jennifer's a senior program manager with NACFE, the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. It's a real pleasure having you on today, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us and doing this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
You know, I think I want to make you tell me about NACFE. We probably won't do a whole lot of that. But it's, I consider the whole team at NACFE, dear friends, and we work closely together. So it's fun having you join us today. And I think it's timely with some work we've been doing. But before we dive into it, this is about, a podcast with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends. And I'm having a ton of fun with it. But do you remember when we first met and became friends? Jennifer, you want to take a stab at that?
I do. Yeah. So it was at our first ACT Expo that I had ever been to. So I want to say it was 2017, 2018. And that's the first time that we met. And I attended one of NACFE's workshops, and I remember sitting through a couple of fantastic roundtable discussions. So that was my first kind of introduction to the group and getting to meet you. And yeah, it's been great ever since. And
you were at Walmart at the time, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What did you think about the workshop? I mean, what do you recall about that? And maybe we can make a plug for future ones here.
Just from start to finish, it was a lot of fantastic information from a wide variety of perspectives. So there was big fleets, small fleets. I believe there's a telematics provider that was there, some folks with new technologies. And so just having those conversations and, explaining from my fleet perspective, what some of the requirements that we were looking for and learning the growing pains some other fleets were having. I really, kind of carried that perspective with me really throughout the whole sustainable transportation and zero emission technologies that I'm interested in today.
Yeah. It's, a little bit of those workshops for me, it's a little bit of, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a bad term for it, but sort of a little bit of therapy. I mean, you can go in and be with others going through the same things and when you're deploying some of these technologies, even whether it's wide base tires instead of duals, or something that seems simpler than we're going to get into electric trucks and hydrogen autonomy maybe. Those are big things that require a lot of change, but change is change. And so in those workshops, I think it's good to sort of just rub elbows with others going through the same thing and learning from each other.
It's easy to find yourself kind of working in a silo sometimes when you're working in a very new area, and we can just use electrification as an example. And so going to these workshops, to your point, is just a great way to level set and thinking about strategies and development from a different perspective.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell us about your career at Walmart. What kind of different jobs did you have, and what maybe were a few things that you look back over and you put a real thumbprint on something you're really proud of at your time there in the sustainability part at Walmart?
Yeah, so I was at Walmart for about 18 years. So I ran the gamut of roles. It started out as a part-time position. I was looking for something in Central Missouri that was a little bit more in line with my degree in public relations. Started working at the local transportation office there in St. James, Missouri for Walmart. Decided that I really liked transportation. I liked the business side of it. I liked engaging with the drivers, and it just kind of blossomed from there. So spent several years on the operations side. Moved out to Utah, was responsible for dispatch operations for the Western US, so pretty much Colorado West. Then started moving into more strategy and analytics, working on delivery frequencies for the private fleet to deliver to the stores across multiple commodities. And then how we defined delivery schedules for these big events. So Black Friday, annual event, lawn and garden, back to school, back to college. Then I eventually moved into sustainable transportation, which really brought me back into all things big trucks. And I was responsible for kind of leading the effort. It was still in a lot of cases in the early stages of electric vehicles, a lot of prototypes, put together several different demonstrations, mostly focusing around yard trucks, and then alternative fuels, renewable diesel, a little bit of CNG, and a whole lot of emissions reporting.
Yeah, wow. Let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to dive into one particular thing. I think, an area that I've never spent a lot of time in, but is really crucial and really kind of what we're seeing today with e-commerce and other things. That whole analytics around operations and scheduling. It sounds like your West Coast, your West Coast time there. Walk us through that. I mean, maybe that goes back, a decade or more, and analytics certainly has improved and how we look at it. But I've always been curious how, people like, Frito-Lay, how do they handle Super Bowl Sunday, or how do grocery chains handle Thanksgiving weekend, or all these sort of big events. There's probably, with the pandemic and so forth, I'm sure there's been many of those weekends with e-commerce and all that kind of thing. But give us some insight as to, what are the dynamics of running a trucking fleet with respect to the inconsistent demands on moving freight, and how do fleets figure that out? Give us some insight there, if you don't mind, Jennifer.
Yeah, so a lot of planning and a whole lot of communication. So, at Walmart, there's about 5,000 stores across the US, and a private fleet that's rapidly expanding. So generally, the time frames of when, these heavy volume flows are going to start. But, then you have to look even more ahead of that time frame to where, when do the orders need to be placed? Are they coming from overseas, or are they domestic? I mean, there's a whole supply chain that you have to think about. And then it's understanding what that volume is going to look like and how that translates into truckload, and the number of trucks that we're going to anticipate needing. What percentage is going to be going to the private fleet? Which percentage is going to be going to outside carriers? So there is a whole lot of moving parts, and despite all the planning, it usually comes right down to the wire as far as what the volume is going to look like, when the flow is going to hit. So fleets really have to be prepared, and they have to be nimble to accommodate these different flows, and the stores as well. The trucks deliver it, but then they have to find room on the shelves to stock it. And so it's very much a challenge. I think when I started in transportation 20 some odd years ago, things were obviously a little bit different. Today, it's very much just in time. Customers expect things when they want it, where they want it, how they want it. So those can be pretty demanding steps for a supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And 20 years ago, retail stores had inventory. They had a back.
Yep.
I remember I used to ask, well, do you have any of these in the back? Well, that's a stupid question now, because there's literally no back. And then, of course, We also nowadays have, in some cases, no stores. There's no front even. We've got the e-commerce, but of course, the challenges of those supply chains. I think the trucking industry is far too modest with respect to what we do here. It's really extraordinary that that we're able to get. I mean, that get the things that we want and need. I mean, the pandemic showed us some empty shelves, but they were filled again pretty quick, and that really most cases probably wasn't trucking's challenge. It was more upstream from upstream from the trucking fleet. You brought us something I'd also like to ask a question on, and that is with respect to a carrier who has both a private fleet and uses outside carriers. And I'm guessing
Mhm.
any company that has their own trucks and drivers, in no way are they able to satisfy all of their needs. They've always got some outside carriers. But from your experience, both at Walmart and other places, that would have to be a pretty powerful thing to be able to understand how running trucks and drivers is, all that operations when you go to contract freight and vice versa. I got to believe the carriers when they're bidding with shippers who have assets like trucks. I mean, that's probably a whole different relationship than with those shippers that do not have trucks and trailers and drivers. So, any thoughts you can share with me and the audience there?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a rather complex solution. A lot of times it really comes down to what the mileage looks like, what the rates look like, what's going to be the most cost effective solution to get freight from point A to point B. Who is going to be the most reliable? Who can meet those level of service agreements most consistently? It's a very dynamic. It's something that is kind of constantly being evaluated. New carriers come on the scene and they want to bid on new lanes, and so there are many departments that work on these solutions, and it makes it a really dynamic and interesting arena to be in.
Yeah, it's an area too that I think is really interesting. And then let's kind of pivot into electric trucks, because one of the things we've talked about with electric trucks is the more dedicated, consistent, and understood routes make more predictable routes is maybe the best term. For the early adopting electric trucks, because we now need to put infrastructure in place and we need to understand route distances. And so, that might be a bunch of private fleets who, have fixed locations that they can move the electric trucks to and past. But, as you talk to fleets, and as you were and as you worked in one, how did you look at adjusting your operations for some of these new technologies? And maybe electric trucks is a good place to discuss that, because these trucks are going to be different, and you can't completely upset your operations, obviously, but you also might be able to morph them a little bit for the trucks. I mean, with respect to new technologies, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it can be a pretty sizable mindset when you talk about procuring vehicles. It's easy to fall into that discussion at a fleet level. But when you look at these new technologies, in some cases, depending on what a fleet's duty cycle is and use case and where they're located and operating out of, it might be actually looking at it at a lane level, so at a specific lane. And in some cases, it might fly in the face of an overarching strategy that they have if it's being hyper optimized, being able to pull back a little bit and say, hey, this location is a great location to test these electric vehicles. The distance from start to end point, and then if it's an out and back scenario or return to base scenario, makes a lot of sense. The range fits well within the range of the battery technology. you're not having, I always jokingly refer to it as dispatching gymnastics. So you don't have to go through a bunch of dispatching gymnastics to test the vehicles in a real world environment. And so sometimes it's just getting really granular into the operations to understand where you can test these vehicles in real world situations, and then expanding pilots outward from there, and really starting to integrate those findings at a very granular level into a broader fleet strategy.
Yeah, and that's where this big data analytics fits well here, because I might suggest that 20 years ago we couldn't deploy these electric trucks because of these range and weight and charging constraints. But now we know a lot more about the operations of the fleet because of the data we're collecting, and now we're better able to adapt and use them. So so tell us about the transition to NACFE and what you're working on at NACFE, and what's exciting about this work.
Yeah, I think, what makes me most excited about NACFE, aside from working for a fantastic leader, is the level of industry engagement that NACFE has, whether it's with other nonprofits or NGOs, with fleets, with academics. There's really a story to be told. The fact that NACFE is fuel agnostic. And we really do our research into these different technologies. You have the hype, you have the naysayers and the skeptics to really, kind of hone in on that sweet spot, and how these technologies can scale is something I'm very passionate about. And it makes me happy to be part of an organization where that's the mission. It's a true service to the industry, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, and so thank you. And it's always good as a boss to hear somebody at least says something nice about you. So you recently led the work on a report NACFE just put out on the use case of electric trucks in class 3 to 6 vans and step vans. So I often call these little trucks. I'm not sure that's right, but tell us about one, what was it like working on that project, and just sort of what were some of the key high points of what the team found, and what was most interesting to you, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, for most of my career, it's really been in the class 8 heavy duty space. So for me, looking at vans and step vans, it was really interesting. The technology is such a great fit today for the typical duty cycles and use cases for vans and step vans. The range requirements are great. There's not a super complex or burdensome charging and infrastructure solution that really has to be created for these vehicles. And it's a huge part of the commercial vehicle space. I did not realize that there's 4.1, almost 4.2 million vans and step vans on the road today. And that's about half of the commercial vehicles out there in the US and Canada. And to me that, we see them driving through our neighborhoods and out and about in town, but I never realized the number was that huge. And big numbers, when you talk about zero emission technologies and reducing emissions, lead to other big numbers. And so electrifying the segment would avoid 43.5 million metric tons of CO2 a year. And that's a big number. And that's going to have a big impact in local communities and urban areas. And it's realistic today. It's not a pie in the sky goal. We can get there with the vans.
And we have a lot of manufacturers in this space. I remember proofreading the report, and one of your images was a collage of all these traditional, even like Freightliner custom chassis step vans to Ford GM types of delivery vans. But now a whole number of companies, I guess the e-commerce explosion has people coming up with solutions. As you looked at the supply side of this, the trucks that are coming and so forth, what struck you in preparing this report?
Yeah, I mean the demand is there and the supply is coming. There's been a lot of big announcements. Amazon and FedEx and UPS and Walmart and a lot of these big companies are announcing transitions to electric vans and step vans and placing big orders for these vehicles. And then I saw yesterday on Twitter actually that our local airport here in Northwest Arkansas is testing an electric van to shuttle passengers. And to me, that was so exciting. There's probably an expectation for big companies to make these transitions happen as fast as possible and making these big public announcements. But I was just as excited to see a local airport testing one electric van.
Yeah. It becomes real personal when we drive our first electric vehicle, when we see one in our, on our streets. And it's like any big change. I got two questions for you because we always seem to run out of time pretty quick. But these are little trucks and medium trucks. Some of these battery packs are no bigger than a Tesla car. So those that's going to be big challenges. Don't get me wrong, but that's one thing. But as we move up into weight classes and into bigger trucks, I mean the challenges just seem to get like almost huge really quick into box trucks and into heavy trucks. So what are the in your mind, what are the like the biggest things that we need to deal with as a whole ecosystem to make let's go all the way. Electric semi trucks go as far as they can, whether that's 300, 400, 500 miles on a day and a charge. What's that going to take? What are the top maybe three big challenges, Jennifer?
I think it's first understanding the duty cycles and use cases, and getting as many as we can on the road today. But I also think there's an element of patience that everyone needs to have. I mean, when we think about long haul, heavy duty Class 8 trucks, over the road charging, that becomes pretty complex. There's weight requirements and limitations that we're going to have to work through as an industry. Being patient, being open-minded to different solutions, and really thinking outside of the box are some key things that for me make a lot of sense to moving this forward. I also think it's going to take fleets talking to each other to figure out how they can utilize maybe behind the fence charging at their facilities to support other fleets that are working to electrify, maybe in lieu of public charging that's convenient and widespread across the region or even nationally. So definitely patience and out of the box thinking, and continue to really let the technology mature, and as much as possible be part of the solution. Work with these OEMs that are developing the technology, because fleets have such valuable input and insights into their operations and into how these vehicles work and run and what their drivers say, and from a maintenance perspective and all that comes with that. So it's such an exciting space to be in, and I truly am looking forward to the next 10 to 15 years to watch it to continue to expand and grow.
Every day there's announcements about sort of real happenings in in a lot of things, and there's days I wake up, Jennifer, and I go, oh my goodness, our industry is not ready for this. We can't, can we do all of this? And of course I kind of just kick myself and say, of course we can, let's get on with it. But how do you view it? I mean, are we ready and capable, or and if not, what does it take?
I would say we are most definitely ready and capable. And I would liken that to when I was still at Walmart in 2005. Lee Scott kind of threw the gauntlet down, and said that the fleet was gonna double efficiency in 10 years. And that was a ridiculous goal. I remember I was dispatching at the time, and I remember sitting there thinking, there's no way, there is no way. And I think everyone was kind of shocked by that, that it was such a stretch goal that it almost seemed impossible. But it took 10 years, but we got there. Walmart doubled the efficiency of the fleet and kind of continued on with that focus on efficiency even after we met the goal. And it wasn't just one solution. It was, are we being, as efficient as possible with the way that we're dispatching? Are we utilizing the best technologies on the truck? From a progressive standpoint, what are new technologies that perhaps we can invest in or help scale up that will further this doubling of fleet efficiency? So it wasn't just one solution that got us there. It was multiple solutions. And that's how I think of the landscape today. I don't know that anyone has a clear picture or can say this is what it's going to look like in 20 years, but I have every confidence in 20 years we'll be where we need to be, because there is so much engagement and so much focus on this technology. So I'm excited. I think it's just, I can't say enough. It's a great space to be in.
Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you on the NACFE team, and thanks for sharing some really valuable insights today.
Thanks for having me.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.